Since it first started tumbling into Ireland through the old pirate coves of West Cork and in the stomachs of drug mules coming from Miami, cocaine has become the drug of our nation. It has swept in like a blizzard, dusting every corner of every small town, and so swift and total has its spread been that the Irish are now some of the biggest users in the world. But to unravel how a small island like ours on the edge of Europe ended up such a big player in the major cocaine leagues, we must follow the white supply lines back to the beginning. We must follow the routes it has taken as it travels across the globe. And most importantly, we need to follow the cowboys who put us on the map. So join me, Nicola Talent, for my new live show, Cocaine Cowboys, the story of Ireland's love affair with Colombia's biggest export. Limited tickets now available for February 10th at the Lime Tree Theatre in Limerick, February 15th in Cork's Everyman, and at Dublin's 3 Olympia on Sunday, February 18th. Tickets available at venues or on mcd.ie. Things are looking increasingly worse for Liam Byrne since he was last sort of enjoying himself eating his paella and drinking his sangria in Mallorca with his family over the summer and had his collar felt by police who put him into custody and extradited him to the UK. But the case against him, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh and others was heard or was certainly mentioned earlier this week in the Old Bailey. We had a reporter there. Now, they weren't ready to go ahead with anything. It's been arraigned to March 1st. But interestingly, both Byrne and Kavanagh came on video link from Belmarsh.
Yeah. I mean, Belmarsh is probably England's most notorious prison, or certainly one of them. It used to be described in the newspapers over there as the UK's Guantanamo Bay. Not really because of the conditions in there.
I wouldn't have thought, yeah.
But they just at one stage, they had a high degree of ISIS prisoners and people like at that stage. Yeah. But so he's in there.
The most notorious prisoners in the UK are housed in Belmarsh. It's category A for men.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the London bombers. You're talking about
there was
major organised crime figures.
Yeah. Julian Assange, of course, is in there.
I wouldn't think he's scary, though, would you?
No, I wouldn't think so. No.
Mind actually sharing a cell with him. I'd say he's loads of info.
He would. He'd be good for
the gossip, wouldn't he?
Good for the gossip, definitely. But yeah, there's other prisoners like Ali Haido Ali who stabbed an MP to death. A guy called David Arness.
Oh yeah.
So, and other prisoners along that line, there's a guy called Delroy Grant, who's a serial rapist known as the Night Stalker. So it's basically one of these prisons with really high profile prisoners. Now, there seems to be also regular prisoners as well, but it's
high profile gangs. I mean, it's, organised crime. You're talking the top end of organised crime, the firearms charges, that kind of thing. You'd wonder how an Irish operation would bed down there, would settle in there. I mean, the strength in numbers, obviously. But there would be other larger gangs, London gangs there. Would Bomber Kavanagh and Liam Byrne have enough sort of rep behind them to feel comfortable there? They possibly do, because prisons are unusual places.
They are unusual places, and they have their own connections that we don't even dream to know about. But it's high security prison, which is the same as, we only have one high security prison in Ireland, which is Portlaoise Prison. Now, it's hard sometimes for us to make a distinction between what that is, but it really means that there is that kind of round the clock protection, that there's in Portlaoise Prison's case, there's army people on site, and it's just a much more monitored system. And it's not just monitored to stop violence within the prison system, but it's probably
heavily guarded and intimidating for a normal person.
And also it's much more carefully monitored to stop people within the prison system continuing their criminal activities on the outside. Now, no doubt that's not always successful. But that is a feature.
And likely keeping them away from one another in the same way as it
Exactly.
happens here in the Irish system, that their enemies, their rivals are identified before they're placed in particular wings.
Exactly.
And, they don't want it to kick off in prison either.
No.
But nonetheless, I mean, while both Bomber Kavanagh and Liam Byrne have been in prison before, it's a long time since they were kind of doing porridge. I mean, they've been living very extravagant lifestyles for the past 2 decades. So it's a big come down. And obviously, like most people facing trial, no doubt they're going to fight these charges. You would imagine they certainly look as if they're going to do so at the moment. But they have obviously got the trial date September, we're talking 6 weeks trial.
Yeah, 6 weeks trial in September now. You never know, of course, with any court system it can be pushed back, but that's what was given today.
And rearranged. They're due back before the Old Bailey in March. But what I've noticed in regards to an awful lot of the cases I have been dipping in and out of, because I would attend a lot of them remotely in the UK and the north of Ireland, since COVID, they've been very prone to accepting them on video link.
Yeah.
Before that, prisoners were constantly brought, it was a day out for them actually, wasn't it? It was a bit of a break from the monotony of prison.
Yeah.
They were brought to the courts and they would have had their lunch on the way or whatever with the prison guards, bit of an outing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still more like that down here than in the north.
Yeah.
Prisoners tend to be physically present and the court believe that's important, I think. They also then get a day out, they get a trip back.
Highly inefficient and expensive on the taxpayer. I mean, can you imagine how much it would cost to transport Liam Byrne and Thomas Bomber Kavanagh into the Old Bailey to stand, to be told, which is what happened in the courtroom the other day, that they hadn't passed the Manchester, they're calling it, file onto the other side. So basically it couldn't go ahead, nothing could happen, and it was just adjourned. Very quick hearing.
Yeah.
But like the cost and the security of bringing them physically into the courtroom for that.
Yeah, well, you're right. It definitely, these things are very procedural. There's an exchange of files and there's always a saying, we didn't get this or this hasn't been disclosed. I'd imagine for the arraignment, which is in March, again, you won't hear any significant evidence, but an arraignment is where people are formally
charged.
They formally make a plea, either guilty or not guilty, and nearly always they're present to make that plea. That would be unlikely to be done remotely. It could be done remotely, but usually people either plead guilty or not guilty.
And the evidence is the 17 charges against the grouping, which is Liam Byrne, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, Daniel McLaughlin, 36, Sean Kent, 37, and Thomas Bomber Kavanagh's son is still fighting extradition.
Yeah, but he's named in the proceedings.
Kavanagh.
And also Peter Keating, or Pater Keating, as we know, is also known better.
It may be transferred, or likely will be transferred from here to the UK before that September.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously Daniel McLaughlin and Sean Kent are UK nationals. They're not known over here. But what you see basically is there's charges relating to 3 offences, really, which are 2 dates, conspiracy to possess weapons and ammunition, and then there's a 3rd charge faced by Bomber Kavanagh and Liam Byrne about perverting the course of justice.
It appears that Liam Byrne is the one who's been described almost like, as the head of this plot. He's certainly been described so far in the UK court as being the connection between those 2 firearm charges, or plots essentially, which go up to make the case.
Yeah, so
the 2 incidents when, now this stuff we've been told before has been picked up on Encrochat, a lot of it. So we're talking about 2 incidents which are going to form the case against them. And they're obviously 2 separate conversations or 2 separate arrangements for these guns.
Yeah, so I mean, it comes from April and May into 2020, the initial charges, and they're to do with basically conspiracy to possess firearms and ammunition. Now, Liam Byrne, as far as we can tell at this point, is never going to have been caught in red-handed with these guns.
At that point, Liam Byrne was living in Manchester, as far as we were aware.
Yeah, and
moving between Liverpool.
Exactly, and Bomber Kavanagh presumably was under the in the legal system in prison.
Yeah, he would have been in custody, all right. Yeah, he was in custody and facing those big charges. That case that I went over to in London. So and he was worried at that stage. He didn't know what they had on him. He, I think, had been initially charged and convicted of a kind of a small firearm offence involving a pink stun gun that was found in his house rather. That was a holding charge. While in prison, he was taken out and told the level of charges, the level of drugs that they were looking at him being responsible for, which was over 200 million.
Yeah.
He actually took a little bit of a health problem at that stage. I think he had to go to hospital. He had a bit of a heart flutter or something. So it's around this that this is going on.
Yeah.
Liam Byrne is still out and about. He's travelling between Birmingham, Manchester and Liverpool.
Yeah.
And he's on these phones.
Yeah, so he's basically, he's operating, from what we've been told, he was operating at Bomber Kavanagh's organisation at this stage. He's the number one man. Bomber Kavanagh is in custody and certainly has taken probably a hands-off approach. So this is in April and May 2020. Bomber Kavanagh knows he's going to prison. He's agreed to plead guilty at that stage. He doesn't know what he's going to be sentenced. So at this point, obviously, somewhere along the line, a plot has been cooked up regarding possession of, I think it's 11 firearms. Liam Byrne is a free man. He's not wanted in any jurisdiction. His dealings with CAB are done, and he's using an Encrochat phone at this stage. And he's, as he always has for a long, long number of years, he's hands off and everything. So he's doing this over these encrypted networks, probably feels relatively safe. And they, somewhere along the line, a plot has been cooked up between, it is alleged, Liam Byrne and Thomas Bomber Kavanagh to make a number of weapons available.
To hand up a number of weapons.
To hand up a number of weapons, to make them available to the NCA, the National Crime Agency. So there's obviously Encrochat.
So this is there basically in the background cooking up, hoping to God that if they hand up some weapons, and this is what we sort of know for the moment. Obviously, this evidence will play out.
Yeah.
But the story in the background here is that between Bomber Kavanagh and Liam Byrne, they decided if we can give up 11 weapons to the NCA, allow them find those weapons, and this actual find happens in Newry in the north of Ireland, that they will look on Bomber more favourably when it comes to the sentence hearing, when it comes to the evidence they're giving to the court in regard to him. And of course, it all backfires. It all
backfires. And I suppose it's cooked up by Bomber Kavanagh really, because Liam Byrne is a free man and Bomber Kavanagh has 100% landed it in it. So they're also facing a charge of perverting the court of justice in relation to these weapons. And I'll read out the actual charge because it really describes the overall plot. The men are accused of attempting to pervert the course of justice between 2020 and 2021. That covers both of those movements of the weapons, or the alleged movements of weapons. And the actual charges, it relates to a series of acts, namely possess firearms and thereafter hide them, and then reveal their whereabouts to the National Crime Agency to enable Thomas Kavanagh to receive a reduced sentence on Operation Hornstay with the intent to pervert the course of justice. So that's quite long, but it really describes what they were trying to do. They were conspiring to possess these guns and then make them available. And that was under this Operation Hornstay. And that
tip off the cops to where these firearms are, so the cops can get these firearms, celebrate the fact they've taken them off the streets. And in their minds, if this plot happened, I mean, it's still up to the court to decide whether or not this is happening the way the UK state are saying it happened. But in their minds, had they been doing that, they would have been hoping that this never came to light, and that Bomber would simply be treated in a kind of a kinder way, shall we say?
Yes, he would
when it came to sentence hearing, they might have said, he's not that bad, or he didn't import that much drugs.
And this is the deals that people believe go on. Look, possibly some of them do go on. I don't know, where some police officer somewhere across the world will stand up and say, he's had a hard time and a tough life or whatever. So that's the perverting the course of justice. But obviously, then the other two tranches of charges relate to the Encrochat conspiracy to move these weapons around the place and to get their hands.
The Encrochat phones, which no Irish criminals were using, according to the Garda Síochána,
Exactly.
the head of the Garda Síochána, who didn't.
How do you feel about that, Nicola?
I
don't think
really
we mentioned
bad about it. I just don't think there's enough. I don't think there's a head on plate yet for this one. But seriously, I mean, Liam Byrne, like, you couldn't have a more significant criminal figure.
No.
From Ireland.
No.
A guy who headed up the Crumlin organisation, the Byrne organisation, which was the Irish entity of the Kinahan cartel.
Yeah.
He's using a bloody Encrochat phone.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, at a certain point in the Kinahan cartel, Liam Byrne was the absolute head of their most prolific wing. And they were, I think it used to be estimated, I don't know how that figure came about, that the Kinahan cartel controlled 70 to 80% of the drugs trade in Ireland, at the point of when Liam Byrne was at his peak. So he was obviously using Encrochat. So there's the movement of these weapons. And interestingly, you're speaking about Encrochat in Ireland. One of the people that is named as part of this plot in the second tranche of charges, which are Jack Kavanagh and Peadar Keating, are two of the people that are named to possess. They're accused of possessing firearms and ammunition. Peadar Keating, of course, never lived in England. Presumably he was in Ireland. Presumably, we haven't seen it. Presumably, if Liam Byrne was texting him over Encrochat, he had to be receiving it on an Encrochat device.
Glad you said that, not me.
So we haven't seen that, but Peadar Keating, of course, would be well known to people who've listened to this podcast. He would have been, he was a guy from West Dublin. He's currently serving a lengthy sentence in regards to a plot for the Kinahan cartel to murder Mago Gately. So Peadar Keating is serving an 11-year sentence, and he's obviously been mixed up in this plot. We haven't heard a lot of evidence, obviously, of him, but he is named specifically in those court proceedings.
He is, and they're looking to extradite him to the UK to face these charges. He hasn't finished his sentence here in Ireland, but it appears that he may just be they may sort of forgo the end of a sentence here to allow him to be extradited on these other charges. Like Keating, he wasn't just responsible for that plot to kill Mago Gately, which backfired sensationally on them. He was also Bomber Kavanagh's number one guy here in Ireland. He was very, very significant player for Kavanagh.
Yeah.
And he certainly, what we know of him since he's been brought before the courts here on these extradition proceedings, is that talk out of him is that Bomber's a rat, and basically, is that face saving? We'll see from the evidence. Was he tricked into maybe being part of this plot to, which the UK state says was to hand over weapons to the NCA in order to facilitate Bomber with a lesser sentence? Did he not know about it? Did he know about it? Was he on the other end of the phone? It'd be interesting to see that. But certainly for face-saving exercises in Portlaoise Prison, where he's serving a sentence, he has been doing a lot of bitching about Bomber.
So exactly, and you can understand why, because if you see the level of sentence that people have received in UK courts for, we go back to Lee Cullen that we've spoken about before, who received a 21-year sentence for no more firearms than are being referred to in this case. So there can be huge sentences in those UK courts. So Peadar Keating, while he would be in theory beginning to come towards the end of his sentence over here, he could be facing another, absolutely more than a decade or even more in prison in the UK. It's interesting, you see, as you will know, the term rat is the most loaded term.
So offensive if you're in gangland, it's offensive. You're in gangland. Okay?
So what do we always hear, right? You always hear if people, you speak to people involved in criminality and organised criminality, they're always accusing each other.
Yeah, if they fall out, it's because the other's a rat.
So, and then you have people that clearly are what's called rats, like Jonathan Dowdall, who make a statement and then are brought to court and read out this statement, right? And everybody knows they are what they are. It's very clear what they are. But there's always this underlying belief that people are doing these deals, isn't it? You just hear it every single time you speak to somebody. They'll say, oh, no, your man is giving the cops this, he's telling him this, but he's not making a statement or he's not doing this. And
I think, though, there's different leagues of ratting.
Yeah.
There is, right? So, I mean, if we take this, and again, these are allegations so far, they haven't been proved before the courts, but if we just take it hypothetically, that a gang were to give up some weapons, give up the allocation of weapons in order to have a lesser sentence for the gang boss.
Which is clearly the charge.
What level of ratting is that? It's cooperating somewhat with the authorities, but to your own benefit. I mean, real pure scale 10 ratting is the Dowdall example.
Yeah.
When you give evidence and you give statements against people and all the rest of it. Would this just look like a little bit of one of the tools of the trade, or does it look like pure ratting?
Well,
or is there an element of when even there's a sniff of a little bit of ratting, everyone jumps on it?
Well, I mean, we probably shouldn't be calling people rats because they're actually helping the conviction of dangerous criminals. But in that world,
yes,
although it's clear everybody believes everybody's doing it to a degree, and I would think they probably are. If they reach a certain level, people have these informal arrangements. Maybe I don't know. But for many people in the criminal underworld, they will believe any help to the police or authorities is absolutely as taboo as it can possibly get. Like, if you look back at...
But only when this is doing it. See, it's a load of bullshit, if you ask me, because it's a very easy one for them to look down their noses on others doing it, but they're all at it in the end of the day. Everybody's doing a little bit. It's like this country, everyone likes to be a little bit... We like a little bit of illegal kind of, or to be allowed. We like a little bit of authorities turning a blind eye on us. If we speed a little bit, we're happy with that, and we don't think we should be.
Like people don't.
People, you like a little bit of everything. We're just in our blood, I think.
Well,
I think that it is a very fake thing, this whole omerta and this whole idea of you don't rat, you don't tout, and all the rest of it. Now, touting is maybe a different level. That's really where it becomes serious when you're talking about... No, when you're giving information that the authorities don't have on somebody else in order to have them jailed. But, I mean, this kind of thing... it's easy for other gangs to look down their noses on this and to claim that they wouldn't do it, but they bloody well would. They all would.
Well, it's a touch of cute...
No honour.
What they used to be called cute whorism, is it?
Yes,
that they used to call in Irish, in Irish politics, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type of thing. However, I suppose the other point would be some people are getting shot in the mid-range criminality for far less that other people are being held to this omerta. And there is always this belief.
Of course they are.
Yeah. I mean, they even speaking to a guard or, a family member saying something to a guard, people have been shot for way less.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, even the idea of it being in existence is about control and nothing else. And it's about keeping the top guys in their place and having everybody else underneath them. It's the structure of that society, really.
Yeah.
It's a kind of an illogical thing in one way. And the belief in it down the ranks that if you know what I mean, it is punishable by death as such.
Yeah.
But then guys at the top can do this little deal and, that's okay.
Well, I think that's what's really happening. It's that these guys who reach the top or reach close to the top, they tend to be manipulative people who always will look after number one, and they don't have that code of honor. And that code
rule with fear.
Yeah, and that code of honor is probably, if you want to call it that, is probably carried out by the soldiers who are expected to take lengthy prison sentences on the chin and not say a word, in order to protect the bosses. And of course, we saw that in the US mafia, where people when they were pleading guilty, even if they gave no evidence against anybody, but just merely pled guilty and said, yes, I was a member of the mafia, they were excommunicated. That happened to soldiers in the mafia for decades. But once they started to penetrate the absolute upper echelons, the top guys all became rats really, really quickly for the most part.
And that's kind of, in a way, the beauty of what Encrochat was.
Yeah.
That idea that, police were able to listen in live over a period of a number of months to exactly what was going on. And they will all tell you in every country that they got their eyes opened to exactly what was going on. One of the big takeaways was that this group might be feuding with this group, but when it comes to business, they're all working together.
Yeah.
So that's a load of bullshit as well, that you can't work together. Yeah, you're these mortal enemies.
Yeah.
You're only mortal enemies on the face of it.
Yeah.
When it comes to business and money, you're working together. I mean, that has been a huge takeaway from those those hacks, along with the fact that there's just such a level of criminality going on, and the normality of the conversations that happen in the middle of these sort of plots to murder being, drawn up. They're also talking about what they're getting their kids from Santa and various things like that. So it's
except in Ireland, of course.
Except in Ireland, because nobody used Encrochat phones here and we had nothing to see. There was nothing to do. I'm actually really interested in a new BBC podcast. Claude actually onto them to see if we can talk to somebody in relation to it. They've done one of the new gangster series on Encrochat.
Yeah.
Like, it's my dream podcast, isn't it?
It is. It is.
And it'll be just interesting to see exactly the levels of arrests. I mean, they're up to 3,000, I think, charges they have against her, maybe 3,000 individuals in the UK and the North.
So you can
it just stops at the border.
Yeah. Well, it could be great. Silence. It'd be a great dream podcast after, of course.
Our guys just are so good.
Or the 10 different categories of rat you could do as well now, since you're making
that. Yeah, no, I am. I do think there's levels of ratting. I think there has to be levels of everything, and there's levels of ratting.
There is, but it's definitely a great insight into how these people think. And remember, Bomber Kavanagh, this could only benefit Bomber Kavanagh at this stage. It didn't benefit Liam Byrne.
And Liam Byrne is, found guilty on this, is facing a pretty lengthy period in jail. He's in his mid-40s now.
Exactly.
So children, and
in order to get maybe a slightly reduced sentence, Bomber Kavanagh has put 5 other people, is it?
Including his son.
Including his right-hand man, Peter Keating, including his brother-in-law, Liam Byrne. He's putting them in great legal peril. And, the Encrochat cases have zipped through the English courts with very little problems. There was some discussion in the courts about getting all that information handed over. And no doubt anybody who pleads not guilty will challenge some of that evidence and the proof of how it can be proven that this is Liam Byrne talking or this is not Liam Byrne making these texts. But those Encrochat cases, really, they have not collapsed in the UK at all. And they're certainly in big legal peril, you would have to say, at this point.
And my information is they're saving the best to last, because there's a lot of corruption as well has been discovered there. And in particular, Liverpool, a concentration on Liverpool. There will be a question in the aftermath of it. Is Liverpool on the verge of becoming or being a narco state?
Yeah.
Isn't that extraordinary? And at the same time, it isn't, because Liverpool has been such a significant place, as significant really as Amsterdam, in the growth of organised crime over the past, 5 decades.
Yeah, of course, as a port city, I mean, I think that that is what connects it with other places like Antwerp and other places across the world that have become real hubs for organised crime, because just the sheer movement of container ships in and out of that port but that's gone on, as you said, goes way back. I mean, way back to post-war even. Liverpool has always, because of that movement of people and movement of goods, that's always been a focus for organised criminality.
Have you been to Liverpool?
I have been to Liverpool,
I haven't. I'm going to go. Actually,
beautiful city.
So believe. No, I wouldn't actually mind going and doing a little bit of podcasting from there. It's always been on my mind if I can find the time. I'd like to do that this year. It's one of my bucket list things for 2024. It's
great. Absolutely regenerated that whole area, part of the city. Really, really interesting. Really good.
So I might do that.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, no, not bucket list. No, just mere survival and just keep. No, I'm going to plan to do the same thing I do.
Would you get to 6 kilometres on the jogging?
Oh,
would you even try?
No, I'm going to continue to maintain my 5 kilometres. Go to lunch at 1:02. 2024 is looking very similar to 2023. That's all good.
That's your hope and your desire, that everything will just stay exactly the same.
Until I shuffle off this mortal coil.
Okay. Well, don't do that too soon, because we have a lot of work to do.
Okay. Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Talent and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.